Hello friends, welcome back to the series of short answer questions. This is the third video which I have been posting for the short answer questions. In this video again I have discussed 10 short answer questions. So please watch the video till the end because all the questions are important. And if you like my video or my channel, then kindly subscribe and forward it to the maximum students so that all of them can get benefited. And you are watching Physio eLearn. I am Dr. Varun Jaiswal. So let's get started. The first question is, write the characteristics of an ideal stump. The first and the important point, it should be located at the site of election. Now what is the site of election? Site of election indicates the level of a limb at which the stump is most suitable for an artificial limb, that is the prosthesis. This is because the muscle at the stump get maximum leverage of work on the artificial limb at this level. Example, for above knee amputation, 11 inches from the tip of the greater trochanter will be the site of election, and for below knee amputation, it should be 5.5 inches from the level of knee joint should be the level of amputation or site of election. Second point, it should be conical in shape, having no projecting bony spur, no redundant muscle mass. Third point, it should heal by primary intention so that the skin is not adherent to the underlying structures and therefore movement of the artificial limb on the stump do not cause pain. The skin should not be folded. Neither the skin should be so thin that it might tend to break and ulcerate. The joint above the stump should have full range of mobility. The stump should be free from any tenderness. The scar tissue should be transversely placed and not exposed to pressure, particularly by the socket of the artificial limb. Second question, physiotherapy management of deep venous thrombosis. The first point is relief pain during the acute inflammatory period. So this point has to be taken care of by the surgeon, treating surgeon or the physician. Bed rest, pharmacological management, that is systemic anticoagulant therapy, elevation of the affected lower extremity, and keeping the knee slightly flexed. Once the systemic anticoagulant therapy is started and the acute symptoms are subsided, then the physiotherapist has to intervene to regain the functional mobility. Now, graded ambulation with legs wrapped in an elastic or non-elastic bandage, or when the pressure gradient support stockings are worn. So only after the systemic anticoagulant therapy is started, the physiotherapist has to start gradual ambulation and with supported stockings or pressure gradient stockings. Then third point, prevent the recurrence of the acute disorder. So the continuation of appropriate medical and pharmacological management, and also use the strategies for prevention of DVT. So what are the strategies for prevention of DVT we are discussing in the subsequent question. Also note contraindications. So if the pharmacological management is not started, these things are contraindicated. Passive and active motion is contraindicated, application of moist heat is contraindicated, and use of sequential pneumatic compression device is also contraindicated, as these will lead to dislodging of the thrombosis and may lead to pulmonary embolism. So what are the prevention strategies of deep venous thrombosis? So initiation of the ambulation as soon as possible, that is after the surgery, preferably day or second day post-operatively. Elevation of the legs while patient is in supine. Then pumping exercises, that is active dorsiflexion, plantar flexion and circumduction of the ankle regularly throughout the day while the patient is supine and lying in the bed. Use of compression stockings to support the walls of the veins and minimize the venous pooling. For patients on bed rest, use sequential pneumatic compression device or unit. Fourth question, enumerate the risk factors for DVT. Post-operative or post-fracture immobilization, prolonged bed rest, trauma to venous vessels, limb paralysis, history of DVT or pulmonary embolism, use of oral contraceptive pills, pregnancy, congestive cardiac failure. So these are the risk factors of DVT. Write 3 special tests to assess venous insufficiency. The first is girth measurement. In girth measurement, we do circumferential measurement of the involved and the uninvolved limbs are taken to determine the presence and the extent of the edema. I repeat, in girth measurement, circumferential measurements of the involved and the uninvolved limbs are taken to determine the presence and the extent of edema. So if the involved limb, the girth is more than that of the uninvolved, then there is presence of the edema, or also you can measure the extent of the edema. So measurements are taken at the anatomical landmarks or at the predetermined and consistent distance apart. Example, 8 to 10 centimeters apart. Second test, competence of the great saphenous vein, or also known as percussion test. So this is done to evaluate the valves of the saphenous vein, and it is the commonest test used if the patient has symptomatic veins. The procedure, we have to ask the patient to stand until the veins in the leg appear to fill, while the palpating a portion of the saphenous vein below the knee and sharply percuss the portion of the vein above the knee. So if the valves are not functioning adequately, then the examiner feels the backflow of the fluid distally under the fingertips. So I'm going to explain it in more detail in the next slide. So as you can see, the examiner has palpated the above the knee and below the knee saphenous vein, and so let's see the procedure again. Patient is in standing position. Palpate the saphenous vein above the knee and below the knee. Percuss the vein above the knee, and if the backflow of the wave of the blood is felt on the finger below, which is below the knee, then the test is positive for the incompetent valve. The third test, cuff test, that is the application of the blood pressure cuff around the calf muscle. The procedure, inflate the cuff gradually until the patient experiences calf pain. A patient with acute thrombophlebitis usually cannot tolerate pressure above 40 mm of Hg. So these are the 3 tests for venous insufficiency. Sixth question, what are Homan signs? So clinical manifestation of deep venous thrombosis, that is DVT, includes the presentation of Homan signs. That is, increase in the edema or girth of the affected limb. Second, palpation, painful palpation or passive stretch of the vein, that can be given by calf stretch, and an extremity that is significantly warmer, that is the raised temperature when compared to the unaffected limb. So raised temperature, stretch, pain during palpation or stretch, and the edema, these are the 3 Homan signs. Seventh, Stemmer's test. This test is performed to clarify the presence of the evidence of the lymphedema or lymphostasis. So Stemmer's sign is the inability to pick up a skin fold at the base of the second toe of the affected extremity. So as you can see in the picture, the examiner is trying to lift the skin fold at the base of the second toe. So if the examiner is not able to lift the skin fold, then the Stemmer's sign or Stemmer's test is positive for lymphedema or lymphostasis. 8th, precaution and contraindication for walking program for the patients with chronic arterial insufficiency. So what are the precautions? Avoid exercising outside during the very cold weather as it may trigger vasoconstriction. Wear shoes that fit properly, have sufficient padding, and so that it does not cause any skin irritation. Inspect the feet carefully for the evidence of skin irritation after each exercise session. Discontinue walking program if the leg pain increases rather than decreases over time. Contraindication, presence of skin irritation or an ulceration, a wound or a fungal infection of the feet. Leg pain at the rest due to advances of vascular disease. So these are the precautions and contraindications. 9th question, effects of smoking on pulmonary function. So smoking affects the pulmonary function by reduction of the forced vital capacity. So there is a reduction in FVC, there is a reduction in FEV1, that is forced expiratory volume 1, that is in the first second. Then reduction in the FEV1 by FVC ratio. Fourth is forced expiratory flow at 25 to 75%, that is FEF 25 to 75% also reduces. Cigarette smoking causes deficit in both FEV1 by FVC ratio and FEV 25 to 75%, which indicates airflow obstruction and small airway disease in adult smokers. So these are the effects of smoking on pulmonary function. The last question: give the rationale for pursed-lip breathing. Now, teaching pursed-lip breathing to the patients with COPD to relieve dyspnea is beneficial as it keeps the airway open by creating a back pressure in the airways. It may splint the airways internally and delay the expiratory collapse, because as we all know, in COPD there is early airway collapse during expiration. Studies suggest that the pursed-lip breathing decreases the respiratory rate and work of breathing, that is the oxygen consumption by the respiratory muscle is reduced. It increases the tidal volume and improves the exercise tolerance. It also improves the gas exchange at rest, that means it gives better oxygenation to the patient at rest. So here we come to the end of the 10 short answer question. So thank you all for watching the video till the end, and if you like the video, so kindly share this video and like the video to the max and share the video to the maximum students, so that all of them can get benefited for their exams. Thank you so much.